We spend half our lives at work. We sit in cubicles, stand behind registers and share coffee, breaks with people we think we know. But have you ever stopped to really look at the person sitting next to you? The one who smiles a little too wide? The one who always seems to be watching when you look up? I used to think the scariest things in the world were found in real ghost stories that will haunt you forever, or in those viral paranormal stories we read online. I was wrong. The scariest things aren't monsters under the bed or true paranormal stories. They are the people who walk among us in broad daylight. The stories I'm about to tell you are true scary stories, far more unsettling than scary paranormal stories. They're about the moments when the professional mask slipped and I saw the darkness underneath. From an intern who didn't understand boundaries, to a grocery store clerk who knew secrets he shouldn't have, to a night in a locked office during a storm that I almost didn't survive. These aren't just ghost stories or haunted stories. They are warnings. If you enjoy Reddit, horror stories, supernatural encounters, or true crime vibes, this is exactly where you need to be. Because the truth is, you never really know who you're working with until it's too late. So get comfortable, lock your doors, and listen close to these disturbing encounters. Let's go back to when I was 20 years old. It was the summer before my senior year of college, a time when life felt like it was just beginning. I had landed this internship at a financial services firm downtown. You know the type. Glass building, air conditioning that's always too cold, and the constant hum of computers. It wasn't a glamorous job. It was mostly data entry, endless spreadsheets, and sitting in front of a screen until my eyes blurred. But it paid well. And for a college kid, that's all that mattered. We were a group of 8 interns, all shoved together in this open-plan section of the office. The rows of cubicles were tight, barely giving you any privacy. The walls were low enough that if you sat up straight, you could see everyone else's head. It was designed for collaboration, I guess, but mostly it just made small talk feel mandatory. Most of the other interns were great. We were all in the same boat, just trying to get through the summer, make some money, and not mess up. But then there was Alex. This is where my workplace horror story begins, unfolding like one of those true ghost stories where the haunting is subtle at first. Alex was the 7th intern. When I first met him, he seemed harmless, maybe a little socially awkward, but in finance, that's not exactly rare. He was tall, really tall, and thin with pale skin that looked like he hadn't seen the sun in years, almost like an unexplained phenomena walking around the office. He had this mop of dark, messy hair that always looked a bit greasy. He didn't fit the clean-cut corporate mold, but I didn't judge him for that. What threw me off wasn't his look, it was his presence. It started subtly, like real paranormal experiences often do, just a feeling. You know that feeling when someone is in your personal space, even if they aren't touching you. That was Alex. He was the definition of a creepy coworker. He would pop up at my cubicle randomly throughout the day because he was so tall and the walls were so low. He would loom over the divider. It was jarring. I'd be typing away, focused on a spreadsheet, and suddenly a shadow would fall over my desk. I'd look up and there was his head floating above the wall. He wouldn't just say hello. He would tilt his head to the side like a curious bird and grin. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was frozen, strained, like he was mimicking what a smile was. supposed to look like. And then came the voice. He would speak in this deliberately bizarre tone, soft, slow, and unnatural. If you've ever heard interviews with Ed Gein, or the way Charlie Hunnam portrayed him, that soft, taunting, almost baby talk voice, that is exactly what Alex sounded like. He'd say things like, "working hard," or "hardly work, and Ronnie," dragging out the vowels. I would laugh awkwardly. You know how it is in a professional setting. You don't want to cause a scene. You don't want to be the person who can't take a joke. So I played along. I pretended it was just him being quirky. But deep down, my stomach would turn every time he did it. It started happening every single day. At least once an hour, I'd see that mop of hair rise above the partition, that stretched plastic grin. He would mutter random phrases that made zero sense, or jokes that had no punchline, and he always directed it at me. The other interns noticed, of course. They would giggle or roll their eyes, thinking Alex was just the office clown, trying to be weird to lighten the mood. They thought we were friends, that we had some inside joke going on. But they didn't see his eyes. When he looked at me, it wasn't funny. It felt predatory, like I was his personal audience for some twisted performance art. It felt like a psychological horror movie coming to life, scarier than haunted places because there was nowhere to hide. As the weeks dragged on, his visits got longer. He stopped making jokes and started just staring. He'd lean his elbows on the cubicle wall and watch me work for minutes at a time. Silence. Just the sound of me typing and him breathing. I'd fake a phone call or say I had to run to the printer just to get away from that gaze. I kept telling myself, it's just a summer job. It's almost over. I didn't want to complain to the manager and be labeled as difficult. But then came the night that changed everything. The night the weirdness followed me home. It was about 6 weeks into the internship. I was at home eating dinner, finally relaxing after a long day of ignoring Alex. My phone rang. I looked at the screen, an unknown number. Usually, I let those go to voicemail, but I was waiting on a delivery, so I swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Just dead air for about 5 seconds. I was about to hang up when I heard it. "The tide's coming in. Pull your boat out of the water." My blood ran cold. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Alex, but it wasn't the soft, teasing voice from the office. It was louder, almost a yell, and he dragged every word out like he was reciting a dark riddle. This was a real creepy stalker story unfolding in my own home, feeling distinctly like paranormal activity intruding on my safe space. Before I could even stammer out a response, he burst out laughing. It was a manic, unhinged sound, loud, hysterical laughter that cracked through the receiver. Then click. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the wall. My skin was crawling. The creepiest part wasn't just the weird riddle. It was the fact that I had never given Alex my number, not once. We weren't friends on social media. We weren't in a group chat. I immediately texted the number back. "Is this Alex?" The message failed to send. Not delivered. I Googled the number. It was a landline. That night I barely slept. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he found my number on an emergency contact sheet at work. But why call me? Why say that? Didn't feel like a prank anymore. It felt like a threat. That Monday, I walked into the office with a knot in my stomach, ready to confront him, but Alex's desk was empty. I went to my supervisor, Martin. I asked him, "Hey, do interns have access to our personal
contact info?" Martin looked confused and said no. Then he told me the news. Alex had been fired the previous Friday. Apparently he wasn't doing any work and had ignored multiple warnings. I told Martin about the call. I told him about the staring, the voice, everything. Martin was surprised, and so were the other interns who overheard. Suddenly, everyone realized that Alex wasn't just quirky, he was unstable. Martin assured me that Alex was gone for good and had no reason to come back. I wanted to believe him. For a week, nothing happened. The office was peaceful. I started to relax. I told myself Alex was just a troubled guy who made a bad joke on his way out. Then came that Friday morning. This is the part that makes this one of the most terrifying true stories I've ever lived through, rivaling any creepy true stories you might hear around a campfire. It was 5 a.m. The world was still dark, just a faint grey light starting to bleed through the blinds. I woke up because of a sound, a snap maybe, or a footstep. It was faint, but enough to pull me from sleep.
I got out of bed and walked to my window, rubbing my eyes. I peeked through the slats of the blinds into my backyard. I wish I hadn't. Standing there, halfway between the tree line and my back porch, was a figure. He was looking straight up at my window. Even in the low light, I knew that silhouette. The tall, thin frame, the messy hair, the rigid posture. It was Alex. I froze. My brain couldn't process it. How did he know where I lived? Why was he here? Then, clear as day, I heard him. "Ronnie!" He called out my name in that same sing-song performative voice he used at the office. He dragged the syllables out until they hung in the morning air. I scrambled for my phone, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I was dialing 911 when I looked back out. Alex tilted his head back toward the sky and started laughing. That same loud, hysterical laughter from the phone call. It wasn't the laugh of someone playing a prank. It was the laugh of someone completely detached from reality, a true psychopath. I slammed the window open and screamed, "Get off my property! I'm calling the police!" He didn't run. He didn't panic. He just stood there for a second longer, watching me. Then, he casually turned around and walked into the woods behind my house, laughing the entire way until he faded into the darkness. The police came, but he was gone. Since he hadn't broken in or made a specific threat of violence, there wasn't much they could do. I finished that internship, but I was never the same. I never saw Alex again, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder how he found me, and I wonder what would have happened if my window had been unlocked that morning. To this day, I can still hear that laughter in the dark. You think you're safe in a small town. That was my mistake. If you like retail horror stories or creepy customer encounters, this next one is a nightmare. I was 17 when this next story happened. It was my first real job, working at a local grocery store in Vermont. You know the kind of place. Everyone knows everyone, and nothing bad ever happens. And we definitely didn't have mysterious encounters or true horror stories happening in our quiet aisles. The biggest drama was who forgot to restock the milk. I actually liked the job. It was simple. I stood at the register, scanned items, and chatted with the locals. My co-workers were mostly teenagers like me or older folks who had been there forever. We had a good rhythm. During the slow hours, we'd all gather at the front of the store near the registers and just talk. We'd complain about rude customers, make fun of the bad music on the store radio, and talk about TV shows. It felt like a little community. Then there was Sean. Sean was different. He was older, about 24. He worked in the dairy section, stocking yogurts and cheese in the back. He was a bit awkward, always quiet. He had hair that was in that awkward in-between stage, growing it out but not quite long enough to look good.
At first, I barely noticed him. He was just the dairy guy. We'd nod at each other in the break room, but that was it. But then I got added to the Coworker group chat. It was just for swapping shifts and sharing memes. Harmless stuff. Sean was in the chat, and soon he started messaging me directly. It started innocently enough. "Hey, are you working Tuesday? Or did you see that crazy customer today?" I replied politely. I was 17, raised to be nice to everyone. I didn't want to be rude. But over the next few weeks, the messages shifted. He stopped asking about work and started asking about me.
"What kind of music do you listen to? What are you doing this weekend? You looked cute today." That last one made my stomach drop. I was a high schooler. He was a grown man. I tried to brush it off, answering with one-word replies or waiting hours to text back. I thought he'd get the hint. He didn't. He started commenting on my social media posts within seconds of me posting them. He'd text me late at night, never anything explicitly threatening, just persistent. "You awake? Why aren't you answering?" I was getting creeped out, but I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to make things awkward at work, so I ignored him. I followed the old advice: don't feed the trolls. One week, I was at home obsessively binge-watching Stranger Things. It was my favorite show. I spent the whole weekend in my room, curtains drawn, totally absorbed in the series, watching what felt like eerie stories on screen. I hadn't told anyone at work about it. I hadn't posted about it. It was just my lazy weekend activity. A few days later, I was at work. We were all standing at the front of the store during a lull, chatting. Sean walked up from the back aisle. He stood on the edge of the circle, listening. Suddenly, he looked right at me and asked, "You like Stranger Things, right?" The air left my lungs. I froze. I racked my brain. Had I mentioned it? Had I worn a t-shirt? No, I hadn't told a soul at that store. I looked at him, trying to keep my face neutral. I just nodded slowly and mumbled, "Yeah, it's okay." Sean smiled, a small, knowing smile, and then turned and walked back to the dairy, cooler like nothing happened. But I felt cold. How did he know? Was he guessing? Or was he watching me? The paranoia set in instantly. I started looking over my shoulder when I walked to my car. I started checking my windows when I got home. And sadly, my gut instinct was right. This was turning into a let's not meet situation. The fear really took hold a few nights later. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. My bedroom was on the ground floor facing the side yard. It was late. The house was silent. Tap, tap, tap. A soft scraping noise against the glass. It sounded like one of those haunted house stories you hear about, but this was real life. I stopped breathing. I told myself it was a branch. The wind. Anything but a person. Tap, tap. It was distinct. It was rhythmic. Someone was out there. I summoned every ounce of courage I had and crept to the window. I peeked through the blinds, expecting to see Sean's face pressed against the glass. There was no one there, just the dark yard. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The comment about Stranger Things, the late-night texts, the tapping. It was all connecting in a horrifying way, more frightening than scary true stories, because I was the protagonist. A couple of days later, Sean texted me again. This time I'd decided I'd had enough. I needed to end this. I texted back, "Sean, please stop messaging me. I am not interested and you are making me uncomfortable. Please leave me alone." I thought being direct would work. I was wrong. Almost immediately my phone buzzed. His reply was short and it chilled me to the bone. "Okay, good luck changing your address." My heart stopped. In one sentence, he confirmed everything. He knew where I lived. He had been watching. He wasn't just an awkward coworker. He was a stalker. I took screenshots of everything. The texts, the timestamps, his cryptic comments. I went straight to my manager the next morning. To his credit, he didn't brush me off. He looked at the messages and his face went pale. Then, I went to the police station with my dad. We filed a report, showed them the address text, and explained the window tapping. The next day, Sean was called into the office. He never came back out to the floor. He was fired on the spot, and the police served him with a restraining order. You'd think I would feel safe after that, right? But a piece of paper doesn't stop a crazy person. For months, I lived in terror. I double-checked every lock. I jumped at every noise. I slept with the lights on. Thankfully, Sean never came back. He faded away, maybe moved to another town to torment someone else. But that feeling, that realization that a normal-looking person is obsessively watching you, it changes you. It taught me to trust my instincts. If someone feels off, they probably are. But sometimes the danger isn't a person watching you from the outside. Sometimes you're locked in with them. Years later, when I was 26, I worked at a small insurance office in Pennsylvania, and that's where I met Tom. This office was the definition of depressing. It was tucked behind a strip mall lit by flickering, fluorescent lights that buzzed all day. It smelled like stale coffee and old paper, but it was a job. It was a Friday, and a massive storm was rolling in. The sky turned black by 3 p.m. The rain was hammering against the roof so hard you could barely hear the phones ring. The manager decided to send everyone home early before the roads flooded. But because I needed the overtime, I volunteered to stay behind to finish filing some client records. The only other person who stayed was Tom. Tom had only been working there for 2 weeks. He was in his early 30s, quiet and hovering. He was the kind of guy who was always just there. If I went to the break room, he'd walk in 10 seconds later. If I went to the copier, he needed to make a copy too. By 5 p.m., the storm was violent. Thunder shook the floorboards. Lightning flashed every few seconds, illuminating the office in harsh strobe light bursts. This was setting up to be a classic night shift horror story, the kind that usually involves ghost encounters or creepy experiences in the dark. Tom was sitting at his desk typing, but every time I looked up, he wasn't looking at his screen. He was looking at me. Around 6:30 p.m., the power died. The office plunged into darkness, except for the eerie, orange glow of the emergency exit signs. The silence was heavy, broken only by the roaring rain outside. It felt like the beginning of a paranormal investigation, silent and waiting for something to jump out. "I think I'm going to head out," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's getting too bad." From the darkness, I heard keys jingle, then the distinct click-clack of the front deadbolt turning. Tom's voice floated through the dark. "It's not safe out there yet. Better to wait." It didn't sound like a suggestion. It sounded like an order. I grabbed my bag, my heart pounding.
I walked toward the front door. Tom was standing there staring out into the rain-lashed parking lot. "Tom, please unlock the door," I said. "My boyfriend is waiting for me." A lie. I lived alone. He didn't move. He didn't even look at me. He just stood there for a second longer watching me. Then, "Wait, sorry. I'm flashing back to Alex. Let me focus." Tom stood there like a statue. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. I tried the landline on the front desk. Dead. I turned around and Tom was right there, inches from me. He had a flashlight now, shining it up under his chin, casting long skeletal shadows on his face. He was smiling. "You scared me," I gasped, stepping back. "Just keeping you safe," he whispered. I needed to get out. Now. I was trapped with a stalker. I told him I was going to the bathroom. I walked calmly down the hall, but as soon as I turned the corner, I sprinted toward the back exit. It led to the employee lot. I reached the door and pushed the crash bar. It didn't budge. I looked down. A thick steel chain was looped through the handle, secured with a padlock. We never chained that door. Tom must have done it while I was working. He had locked us in. I heard footsteps coming down the hall, slow, deliberate. "Name," he called out. "Where are you going?" I dove into the supply closet and pulled the door shut, holding my breath. I watched through the crack at the bottom. I saw the beam of his flashlight sweep across the floor. He walked right past me. I waited 10 minutes, 10 agonizing minutes in the dark, listening to the thunder and my own heartbeat. When the coast seemed clear, I crept out. I knew the front door was my only chance. I moved silently back to the lobby. The front door, the glass one, was shattered. Rain was blowing in, soaking the carpet. Glass was everywhere. Tom was gone. I didn't ask questions. I didn't look for him. I ran. I scrambled through the broken glass, jumped into my car and sped out of that lot faster than I have ever driven in my life. The next day, the police found Tom's car still in the lot. His wallet and keys were on the driver's seat. The security cameras had been manually turned off an hour before the power went out. Tom was never seen again. Some people say he had a mental break. Others say he ran away. But I know he had prepared that chain. I know he turned off the cameras. He had a plan for that night. It remains one of those unsolved mysteries that haunts me. I don't know what his plan was, and I thank God I didn't stick around to find out. I quit that job immediately, and now, whenever a storm rolls in and the lights flicker, I make sure I know exactly where the exits are and who is holding the keys.